Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings. I'm your usual host, Michael Moore, along with my usual co-host, Russell Clay. Say hello, Russ.
Aloha.
And we are back this week after some minor technical difficulties, Russ, that we both promised ourselves would not happen again. So we will stick this one out. But without further ado, Russ, on the show today, we'll go through our usual news and notes. We have our standard number of, injuries we need to cover for the rest of the way. And then we will get to, something we'll probably do next week as well, which is our fantasy playoff studs and duds, which we did last week, but only me and Russ know about. But we will bring all of you into the loop this week, where we look at the good and the bad from the fantasy playoffs.
My dog definitely knows too. He was right there. So he definitely got the full episode.
Yeah, actually my dogs did too, off in the distance. I'm sure they were paying attention to how good Russell Wilson was last week. And then we will round out things, Russ, the usual way on this show with our DraftKings value plays. But first off, and even before news and notes, Russ, you and I we participate in several leagues, probably too many, I think some people would say. So chances are you and I are both in some semifinals that we played yesterday. Why don't you lead off with your most interesting semifinals game? What happened? How did it shake out?
So, yeah, around this time, it's week 15 now. So the herd is thinning in terms of leagues that I'm still alive in. I had quite a few sort of first round exits, which, it's kind of standard, that's the break sometimes if you don't get that first round bye. But the one league that I'm still alive and kicking in is the league that I might have mentioned a few weeks ago, where I was last in total points in the regular season.
Nice.
Got in with the fifth seed. Upset the guy the first week, and this week I started Tavon Austin against the poor guy, and obviously he went for 2 touchdowns. I had Emmanuel Sanders, Todd Gurley, and Phillip Rivers. I just feel bad for the guy at this point that lost to me, but
yeah, and there's something to be said, I think, for those leagues that either do it, the old school rotisserie leagues that just do it by points, or which, like, my brain says that's the way to go. That's the most fair way to determine the best team, truly. But my heart is like, no, like, I still want, like, I just want to play one guy, because all I got to beat is that one guy.
Yeah, I
could score 60 points in a redraft league 1 week, but look, he could score 58. Who knows? So
obviously I'm on the good end of this, but I'm looking at this whole situation like, wow, this is
look, at the very least, you could just be happy to be there next week.
Yes.
It's really win-win for you. It's like, look, you got second when you probably shouldn't have.
Right.
But hey, if you win, that's good too. So
yep.
Well, Russ, I think I have a story to top this. I did not tell you before because I wanted full surprise on this.
A live reaction.
Yeah, truly, I was just as stunned. And in my, I've been playing fantasy football since 94, 95. Literally the 4th or 5th grade, pre-internet. This is probably the craziest thing to ever happen to myself.
Hold on, big development, breaking. Did you guys write your scores down?
Well,
did you look through it?
So, as a side note, here's how we did it. I actually got into it through my dad, who did it for a very long time. And he did it with the guys at his work, right? Which I think is how people did it back in the day, pre-internet.
Yeah.
So they needed another person, and I knew the players, so I got in. So 4th grade, I'm in a fantasy league, and I'm doing pretty well too. I think my mom financed it, because obviously I'm 9. I don't I could save my allowance for a year.
Come on, man. You got to diversify the allowance payments.
Well, essentially that was my mom was doing. She was just deferring payments towards that. So, that team had everyone. It had Isaac Bruce. It had Curtis Conway. It was really quite the team that I put together. Anyway, so this week I'm in a redraft league. Really the only redraft league I care about anymore. And I'm playing my brother of all people. All right. So this is my home league. My dad's in it. My best friends from high school are in it. My brother's in it. I'm playing my brother. Right. So he has like Jameis Winston. He has Beckham. He's got the New England defense, which surprisingly went off yesterday. So I'm down 47 going into last night.
Oh my God! Okay.
Care to guess who I had after last night?
Wow!
I mean, David Johnson.
He must have swung so many matchups last night.
Oh yeah,
unbelievable.
Standard, PPR scoring. 5-point bonus for 100 yards. I'm down 47 going into last night, Russ. I'm up by 2 after that game. And now I got Calvin Johnson tonight, but it's over. So and he has no one left. It was, believe me, I went to sleep, Russ. I was that despondent because all my other semis didn't work out. And I was like, you know what? Screw this. My season's over. I'm going to bed early. And I wake up to the Roto World text that says David Johnson, career night. And I'm like, oh, maybe this worked out after all. And sure enough, it did. So
wow.
It can happen to you. It happens to the best of us, believe me.
And quickly before we get into something or anything, David Johnson, I mean.
Oh, we'll cover him. Oh, we'll talk about it, Russ. Believe me.
Oh my God.
He will be in our too soon mock draft round 1 in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, he was quite the development last night. I mean, look, fantasy playoffs, DraftKings, whatever format you're in, David Johnson probably played a role in it. So. Yeah, it was good times. And to my brother, who doesn't listen, but tough. Sorry, I'm older.
That's what he gets for not supporting the show. Actually,
there you go. That's right. If he would have just listened, he probably would have done better. Anyway, so we'll. I'm sure you and I, Russ, will have even more stories next week after the fantasy championships have concluded. And look, we invite the listeners. I think all one of you out there to submit your stories to us because hey, everyone's got a story, but. Without further ado, Russ, let's get to why people are here, which is information. So first off, news and notes. Let's go down the injuries real quick. LeSean McCoy at first thought it was an MCL sprain. Turns out it's a slight MCL tear. He was really one of the last running backs standing, I would say, in all of fantasy. And now you've got this. Let's just say, Russ, he's out next week. Carlos Williams, who actually didn't do bad as a stand-in. Where are you putting Carlos next week if McCoy is in fact out, Russ?
Low-end running back 1. I'd be firing him up if you have him on the bench or pretty much.
He's next week's David Johnson. That's what you're saying.
No, not even slightly close. But I do think he can put up running back 1 numbers with a full workload. So.
I think so. And look, he's proven it in spot starts and in backup time this year. He's done quite well for himself. Probably not a place for him next year because I think McCoy probably will be back. But hey, you never know. But at least for next week, I think it'll be Carlos Williams. So, all right, Russ. Another injury to another major running back, Adrian Peterson, left the game yesterday with an ankle injury. However. All indications are he should be back for next week. Still running back 1 for you, Russ. No trepidation with that ankle there for the fantasy championship.
I'm looking beyond the Adrian Peterson here. We'll see how he does. If he's all set to go, then yeah, fire him up. You don't really have a choice at this point. And in daily, he'll probably be lower owned just because of the injury risk. So he's an interesting tournament play. But I'm kind of looking at Jerick McKinnon here. If Peterson's questionable or there's rumors that the injury is sort of something that's going to limit his workload, I'm looking at McKinnon to maybe have more of a receiving role.
Well, definitely on the receiving role. And look, if you're in a PPR league, even better. And I'm with you. And look, like you said, Adrian Peterson's one of the few workhorse backs left, but Minnesota's got a good path. I mean, they're on track for the playoffs. It wouldn't be the dumbest thing to sort of tap the brake with Peterson the last 2 weeks, and give, like you said, McKinnon some more snaps. Even if Peterson can go, you might as well rest him at least a little bit, at least on those passing downs. There's no point in throwing him out there. So I think I'm with you. I think McKinnon could be an interesting flex, assuming they commit to him pretty early on, which they could.
Right.
All right, so that was the injuries for this week, Russ. So some other news and notes. Steven Jackson, yes, that's Steven Jackson, Signed by New England today for the stretch run. Seemingly like maybe Belichick owed him a favor. Like Jackson may actually play in his Super Bowl now, even if he only plays in 4 games leading up to it. Anything there, Russ? Anything for us in the fantasy community to glean from that?
A picture surfaced of Steven Jackson. He posted it on Instagram. The hair's gone.
Whoa.
I don't like it.
Whoa.
I don't like it.
Was that Belichick imposed?
I don't know, man. But no. On a serious note, I hope he gets his ring. I don't think he has much.
You're from Massachusetts. Let's go full disclosure here, Russ.
I'm a Rams fan, so it's coming full circle.
Whoa! Wow. Okay. Well, that was a development. Okay.
I watched him just suffer for years. So I hope he gets that ring. Based on what I saw in Atlanta, he just doesn't have much left.
Didn't look like it.
I mean, neither does Tim Hightower, and he's doing awesome things for fantasy purposes right now. So, I mean, he's worth a pickup if you have an extra spot, but I'm not too optimistic about anything for him.
Yeah, I can't say I blame you on that one. I think it's just a crapshoot every week with that team in the backfield, man.
Yeah.
Especially running the ball. I mean, look, if you had to buy one, I think I might go James White strictly for the receiving value.
Oh, it's absolutely James White. Yeah.
I mean, even running awesome. You've got Iosefa, exactly with 14 carries, and Brandon Bolden with 10. So even then they don't know who they're gonna pass it or they're gonna rush it with.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I cover the college game almost more than the NFL game, and I don't know where he went to college. So.
See, exactly.
I'm just like, oh, okay.
So don't feel bad. Don't feel bad, listeners. You're not alone. Trust me. Yeah, I think bottom line situation to avoid, much like it has been all year until, or at least after Dion Lewis got hurt. I would say.
Yeah.
All right. Last news and note of the episode, Russ. Odell Beckham, which maybe provided the most entertaining game action yesterday, and not even like when they were throwing the ball. But Odell Beckham today suspended for 1 game, will miss Week 16, barring an appeal, which can't imagine that appeal being granted. So I think you have to assume he's out for Week 16. Without getting into too much of like what happened, because I don't think it really matters fantasy-wise, who are you taking in place of Mr. Beckham, Russ? I mean, is Ruben Randall going to be a starter on some fantasy teams in championship week? That can't happen.
So if we think back to 2 years ago,
a much simpler time, Russ.
How that Giants offense looked pre-Odell Beckham, it was a travesty, and we thought Eli Manning was pretty much done. Ruben Randall, I think, is sort of underrated at this point because he's sort of become the butt of jokes. He's actually played pretty well this year on, I believe, less than 80 targets. He's got 6 touchdowns and around 500 or 600 yards. So he's played well this year in a smaller role. He might get the number 1 corner. I'm not sure about the matchup quite yet, but if he pulls, I think they're playing Minnesota. So if he pulls Xavier Rhodes, that's going to be a problem for him because I don't like him against any number 1 corner. But yeah.
Yeah, and to me, this game for the Giants as a whole at Minnesota, especially without Beckham, that just that seems like a train wreck.
Will Tye has sort of emerged as that low end tight end one that we thought. What's his name? He's IR'd now.
Larry Donnell.
Yeah, Donnell. We thought Donnell. He's basically taking that production. So. That's an interesting flyer for a tight end, but other than that, yeah, I'm fading that whole situation.
I would tend to agree. I mean, look, as much as I would love for Rashad Jennings to repeat that 107-yard performance that he had this week, I cannot see that happening. So I think we're in agreement, Russ. Fade the Giants. Fade the Giants as much as you can this upcoming week. So, all right, that's the news and notes, Russ, for fantasy semifinals. Now let's get into some fantasy studs and duds from this past weekend that won a lot of your fantasy semifinal matchups, and probably lost some of your fantasy semifinal matchups. Which, look, me and Russ are in the same boat, so we are here for you. It's not your fault. Yes, we'll repeat that as many times as we have to, and we will make it stick, by God, I swear it. So, first up, Russ, let's just go in positional order. The top of the lineup, quarterbacks. Stud this week, I don't really know that there's any other candidate for the top stud. Cam Newton, 340 passing yards, 5 passing touchdowns, and if that wasn't enough, 100 rushing yards to go with it. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, and the most amazing part is he is somehow making Ted Ginn sustain high-end wide receiver one production.
Oh. I have yet to meet a person that is starting Ted Ginn this year. I'm just going to throw that out there. It's like Moby Dick. You can't find him.
In DFS, though, it's kind of becoming like
a thing.
You look at him and you say no, and then you make your Cam Newton lineups, and it's like, okay, well, it has to go to somebody, and Cam Newton's making this happen this year. So
and I need a player at like close to minimum value, and Ted Ginn's there. Why not?
Yeah. So Ted Ginn has 3 straight weeks over 80 yards and 2+ touchdowns. Every week he has over 80 yards.
And 2 touchdowns. Every
week.
2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
So what is the world coming to?
When Ted Ginn has 6 touchdowns in 3 weeks, you just have to give it up to Cam Newton. He's been a beast. Like quarterback 1 in 4 of the last 6 weeks, I believe. Rich Rebar tweeted that out today.
He's turning it on, man. He's turning it on. And look, against the Giants defense, I think we all had a feeling he was going to play well. I don't know that you could have predicted he'd play this well. And I don't know that you could repeat it. I mean, games like this do not happen all that often. But look, it's obvious he's in his zone right now. And I don't see it really stopping next week. Let me look at the matchup. But if you're a Cam Newton owner, I don't think – he's at Atlanta. Well, that'll be good times. He should run circles around them. So, he's just on fire, man. And I don't see that. Look, he's the only – I'm not going to say he's the only playmaker on that team, but it's pretty close. And he's delivering, and he's making everyone around him better. I think that's a fact.
So and not only is he delivering, but it's at the right time for fantasy purposes. If he did this weeks 1 through 8 of the year, I mean, you got out to a nice lead, but he probably wouldn't sustain it. But he's hitting his stride at the perfect time. Yeah. And he's winning you playoff games like this week almost single-handedly. So
right. If you were playing poker and you had Cam Newton or blackjack, this would be what we call a heater, and you need to ride it out as long as you can. All right, and you brought up a good point. I mean, it's a really interesting debate now on who the top dynasty quarterback is. You've got Cam Newton playing lights out. You've got another young quarterback and Russell Wilson playing lights out. Meanwhile, the 2 guys that I think everyone would agree were ahead of these guys before the season, Andrew Luck and Aaron Rodgers, for different reasons, but have fallen back a little bit. I mean, I think you're right. I think there's a legitimate debate on who's the number 1 dynasty quarterback.
And obviously, Rodgers gets Jordy Nelson back next year. Luck's going to be.
It's addition by subtraction with Devontae Adams.
Oh God,
I digress, Russ.
And then you look at Luck. He's going to be back healthy with Dorsett in his 2nd year, Moncrief in his 3rd year, and Hilton basically in his prime. So I honestly couldn't have thought of a combination that would knock me off, thinking Andrew Luck was by far the quarterback 1 in Dynasty to begin the year. But Cam Newton gets Kelvin Benjamin back next year, and Devin Funchess in year 2, and he still has Greg Olsen. I mean, and the running ability, it's close. It's like they're basically 1A and 1B for me right now, and Rodgers is 1-3.
Yeah, and I think that's entirely fair. I mean, especially with those guys, Newton and Wilson, you've got the added benefit of the run game with those guys where they can look, it's not like every week they're going to go off for 50 yards or 100 in Cam's case, but look, they're going to they're going to escape the pocket sometimes, and they're going to get 20, 30, 40 yards for you, more often than not, I'd say. So,
and don't forget, Russell Wilson has a Jerry Rice-esque Doug Baldwin on his team. So,
we'll get to that, Russ. Believe me, we will get to that. All right, so real quick on the dud side for quarterbacks, we just mentioned him, Aaron Rodgers.
yeah.
At Oakland, which on paper looked like a good matchup, but ended up with 204 passing yards, just one touchdown and one interception. As a Rodgers dynasty owner myself, I'm finally willing to concede that, he's not the top option anymore in dynasty. I mean, he's been very, I'm not going to say mediocre this year, but it's been mid to low end quarterback one for him all year. He has never been truly one of the elite options on a week-to-week basis so far.
In fantasy, he hasn't. I don't think his play has declined, but you look around and even now, even if you put Jordy Nelson back there, I'm still worried about the other guys. Nelson opens things up for Cobb, but Cobb not being able to get separation this year is really bizarre and not something anyone really expected. And then you look at James Jones, is all he can do is catch back shoulder throws, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah,
and
that's
Adams,
okay. That's okay. But I'm with you. I think, and I know I wrote about this a couple weeks ago, but the lack of a deep threat is really hurting them. It really
maybe
really
just
limits the field for them.
Yeah, and maybe his threats just aren't as good. Like maybe Cobb's regressing back, maybe he just doesn't have the weapons that he once did.
Yeah, well, look, who knows how they're going to address that, but I think it's fair to say they probably need to. So,
yeah.
All right. For our stud running back, Russ, the previously mentioned David Johnson, which I don't know if there's much else to say. I mean, look, he was a popular pick in a lot of leagues and a lot of daily stuff, which we'll get to in a second. Because, look, Andre Ellington was out. They already said that hours before game time. Obviously, Chris Johnson, who had been handling the ball most of the season in Arizona, out on IR. So it was the David Johnson show going in. And, man, I think we're all just glad it paid off. 187 rushing yards on 29 carries. So he's averaging 6 yards a clip. 3 rushing touchdowns. But let's not forget, 4 receptions for 42 yards. He had over 220 total yards, Russ. That was also a guy that probably single-handedly won you games yesterday.
Yeah, and he came on again at the perfect time. He didn't do anything all year, but you had to keep him rostered basically just because you drafted him 10th, 9th, 10th, 11th round, somewhere around there. And, I mean, he finally paid off. It's just everything you want. And you have to think, how many fans did he gain last night of people who just kind of threw him in and were like, well, I hope this guy's good. And bang.
That sounds like the most generic name ever. I'll go with that. But even like DraftKings, he had 50 points. I mean, let's just say if you had a lineup of Cam Newton, Antonio Brown, who we'll get to in a second, and David Johnson, you probably did pretty good. You're probably close to the millionaire maker just on those 3 guys alone. But speaking of DraftKings, Russ, segue, with millions being won each week, every play and every game could take you closer to a life-changing payday. Hurry over to DraftKings.com now and use our promo code PFF to play for free with your first deposit in this Sunday's $1 million fantasy football contest. First place takes home $100,000. That's PFF for a free entry now at DraftKings.com. So let's look at a guy, Russ, that if you did pick him in DraftKings, probably didn't do so well. Todd Gurley, just 48 yards on 21 carries. He did have a touchdown, so he did salvage something. But after a big bounce-back week last week, he sort of, I'm not going to say he's come back down to earth, but he definitely regressed a little bit. It was a bad week for us. What's your thoughts on next week? Are we in for another dud? Do we just need to stay clear?
That's the bummer. You kind of wanted this last week as sort of All right. Top this off, and then I can figure something out next week. He hit value almost. He had a few receptions as well. So in PPR, he didn't kill you, but he also wasn't the running back one stud that you kind of needed.
Right.
Likely if you're in a playoff matchup. So
Well, and you sort of alluded to this next week, championship week. He will be
yeah.
at Seattle. So good luck with that one if you have Todd Gurley. All right, let's move on to some receivers, Russ. Stud, our main man, Antonio Brown, who seemingly, as long as Ben Roethlisberger's playing, he can do no wrong. 16 catches, 189 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But pretty much just another day at the office, right?
And it's literally not even a hot take to say he would break the receiving yardage record if Ben Roethlisberger played the whole year. That's kind of a cold take.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of like meh.
I mean, clearly, he's got, 1,600 yards now. And he's just incredible every game with Ben Roethlisberger. So this 1 year week, I mean, or negated playing against Cam Newton or David Johnson. So
that's an interesting point. I would love to see the matchup that had like Cam Newton going against Antonio Brown.
You look at going into that game, you played against Cam Newton or something like that. You probably thought you were done, and then that's a game right back that evens everything out. So
yeah. So some fun facts, Russ. So the 16 catches yesterday, for most receivers, that might be a career high. Oh, no. That was only the second highest catch total for Antonio Brown this year. He had a game with 17 catches. The yardage total, 189. You might think, oh, hey, that's a career high or at least a season high for some receivers. Oh, no, Russ. That was only the third highest receiving total for Antonio Brown this year, behind 284 and 195. So, yeah, he's pretty good. And as you said, 1,586 yards. And that was with Russ. Let me count it out. That was with 4 games under 50 yards.
It's just stupid, how good he's been. And with Landry Jones and Michael Vick, he just got crushed those games. And I'm not sure I've seen somebody get open so easily before.
Right.
I mean, we've seen players dominate. We've seen Calvin in his prime just be able to go up over anyone and sort of run a 4.3 at 6'5", but we've never seen a guy that's literally uncoverable.
Right.
So
right. Well, and
Gary Rice, obviously, but you know what I'm saying here.
Yeah, and to have, I don't like to use this word because it's not very tangible, but it's obvious he's got chemistry with Roethlisberger, and it's almost Roethlisberger. It's just this sense. It seems like he knows where to throw it for him to get it, and they do it. I mean, with ease. I mean, it's very simple for them to just throw it around like they do.
And this was the Broncos. I mean, if you were listening to the game, Chris Harris hadn't given up a passing touchdown or a receiving touchdown in 2 years. So it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's unreal. So, but with every peak, Russ, there is a valley. So on the flip side, Larry Fitzgerald, has been a wide receiver one most of the season for a lot of people. Saved a lot of people's seasons with that late round pick of him. 3 for 43 last night. His lowest catch total of the season, or tied for it with 3, and the third lowest receiving total. Not the right time to turn in that kind of performance, Russ.
Yeah, and unlike Antonio Brown, most players sort of have peaks and valleys in their season, like you mentioned. Regression happens. We're seeing it with Devontae Freeman as well, and a little bit with DeAndre Hopkins. It's not that the team's game plan necessarily changed or anything actually changed. It's just that you can't sustain some of these production totals that the players were putting up earlier this year. You can't put up 40 fantasy points a game like Devontae Freeman did,
Unfortunately, you cannot. So
yeah. Well, I don't know. We'd have to see. But I mean, Larry Fitzgerald was catching a touchdown basically every game early on in this year and going for over 100 yards and 8 catches. So he's coming back down to earth. It kind of sucks that it happened this week, but I just think this is natural regression,
Well, yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think there's something to be said for, and this is kind of going off on a tangent, but I think there's something to be said for the good real life NFL teams where, if you're truly well rounded, I mean, you do what you have to do to win, right?
Right.
So look, it would be very nice for fantasy players if they just relied on Larry Fitzgerald all day and gave him 12 targets a game. But look, the better teams in football, and I would, say in sports in general, they figure out what they need to do each week to win. And it's going to be a little different. You tweak it. I mean, the teams that are good all season, believe me, they don't run the same plays every single week. They have to adjust. And with a guy like Fitzgerald, and especially in Arizona with Palmer, he's got a lot of weapons there. I mean, look, it was on display last night with David Johnson. They figured out, hey, this is easy. Just give it to David Johnson this week and see what happens. Now, on the flip side, do I expect that to continue next week for David Johnson? No, I expect them to game plan and figure out, exploit some weakness in their opponent, and that's who's going to be the beneficiary. But, look, they've got Michael Floyd, who's finally coming around. They've got John Brown, who has a quietly solid season as a wide receiver 3 there. And you've got Carson Palmer, who I would say may be one of the few people to challenge Cam for MVP. And MVPs, much like Tom Brady, much like Cam Newton, they just, oh God, I'm going to get ripped for this. They find ways to win. I hate saying
Oh, no.
I know. It's just, I hate saying that. But you know what I mean? They find the open guy. They find the guy that will score. I mean, it's not just, hey, Larry Fitzgerald's good. Let me just feed him the ball 50 times.
And you could tell very early last night that the game plan was get the ball to John Brown deep and attack that secondary that's weak to the outside receivers. So John Brown had 2 big drops for touchdowns. But other than that, I mean, he's good, Michael Floyd's good. And like you said, they can pretty much spread it out. And opposing defenses, once you get to like week 10, they're not paying attention to the NFL like we are, watching all 32 teams and seeing what's going on. But when they have, say, a Larry Fitzgerald coming in that week and he's got 1,000 yards through 10 games, that's going to be what, like, the coach on the other team is like, okay, well, that's their main guy. We got to focus on him now. So there's a little bit of that going on too, where they're trying to put more coverage on him as well.
And you just let David Johnson run wild. So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So tight ends for us to round it out. Jordan Reed, who, I mean, has had quite the season so far, continued it, 7 catches for 84 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, I think this is the Jordan Reed we all wanted to see, right? I mean, this has been his healthiest season. I mean, he did miss 2 games, but again, relatively speaking, that's the healthiest he's been his entire 3-year career.
He's becoming a common theme on the show. He's not Gary Barnidge levels by any means, but he's playing so well that he's becoming a topic every week, and that's not just us either. So yeah, he's been fantastic, and I mean, Kirk Cousins is part of the reason why he's been playing awesome too. So
you can say it, Russ. You don't have to feel bad about it. You can say it.
He's pretty good.
You like that?
I was not saying it, but I'm
although he's like now trying to trademark it, so I don't know if we have to pay royalties now. So we'll take care of that on the back end. All right, fantasy dud for tight end. And I kind of had a hard time finding a dud, Russ, because there's a lot of good tight ends this week, from Greg Olsen. Gronk obviously did his thing. Barnidge caught a touchdown. Julius Thomas had some pretty good production. Even Will Tye, you had mentioned, had some streamer potential. But I did find one who I was a victim of this player, Jacob Tamme, who, quietly has had a decent season in Atlanta and was a bit of a question mark to even play, but did end up being active. But if you did roll with Tamme this week, you were burned. He had no catches for no yards. And, I mean, hopefully Jacob Tamme wasn't your starting tight end, but if he was,
and he was one of those guys that you would randomly throw in there throughout the season, and you had no expectations. And there were quite a few times where he far exceeded those expectations. So I wouldn't have been afraid to put him in, especially after Leonard Hankerson is he's literally off the team now. So that was their second option in the pass game, and he was gone. So the process wasn't horrible if you had to throw him in there. So
all right. So that's our fantasy playoff studs and duds for this week, Russ. We will, of course, follow that up next week with a championship recap. But without further ado, let's get to the quasi-sponsored DraftKings value plays for this week, week 16. Again, let's go in order of roster. I'm going to kick it off with Blake Bortles, who, has always been, oh, man. Kind of like you live by the Bortles and you die by the Bortles, right? Like it can be really good for you or really bad. So he's 5th in DraftKings points on the season and average points, only 8th in salary at 6,500. But the encouraging news, he does play the Saints defense this upcoming week. So I think I'm going to essentially play whoever is playing the Saints defense, Russ, and that just happens to be Blake Bortles this week.
And there's a few darts you can throw with him. Alan Hearns had a down last week, so people might be off of him. He's an interesting tournament play. Julius Thomas, again, he's been getting consistent targets in that offense. And obviously, I mean, if you want to do the regular stack, you look at him and Allen Robinson. So yeah, the Saints defense, they're playing tonight, so we'll see if they can show some fight. But pretty much all year they've been a swinging gate. So
yeah, and just a quick update: if for some reason you didn't get the results of the Saints Lions game, real quick, it is 7-3. 14-3 with 13 left in the second. The Lions are up, by the way. So continuing a theme here of the Saints defense. So by all means, start Blake Bortles next week. You won't regret it. Matt Stafford, 6 of 7 for 82 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first quarter and change. So yeah, Blake Bortles. Come on.
My goodness.
All right. Anyway, but some other plays, Russ, at the quarterback position. You got Drew Brees. Not a good week so far. I mean, you never know. Garbage time can be very good to Drew Brees this week. But 6,800, not a bad price. I think I like your next mention, Ben Roethlisberger at 6,800, even better. I don't get why Roethlisberger is still that low as far as salary goes. It seems like he always is. He's never a top 3 option, but he's always going off. This week it was 380 and 3 touchdowns. Like, what am I missing here? Why is he not priced higher?
I don't know, but you just don't ask questions and stack him with Antonio Brown, and then you just set your lineup and you say, okay.
Yeah, you just thank the DraftKings algorithms and be on your merry way. So.
And then maybe randomly throw in D'Angelo Williams and Martavis Bryant and
whoa, Russ! Oh, you're getting ahead of yourself. We'll get to Martavis Bryant in a moment.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, that's okay. That's right. But running backs first, Russ. David Johnson. Again, if we talk any more about David Johnson, we're just going to have to call this the David Johnson podcast. But
he deserves every
he might. 12th in salary this upcoming week at 5,800. Look, if he's your top running back in your lineup for this week, I can't really blame you. I mean, to have your top running back option priced at only $5,800, that leaves you a lot of flexibility. And look, he might be the top running back scorer again, so it's not like it's a bad play there.
I might go 100% David Johnson.
Oh, there you go. Wow.
So, I
don't be mad, Russ, if we come back next week and he rolled his ankle like a
You'll know how I did.
Okay,
You'll know how I did.
Yeah, the percentages are inflated thanks to Russ there. All right, some other running backs, and these sort of tie into the guys we mentioned earlier in the podcast. They got injured this week. You've got Carlos Williams out of Buffalo playing Dallas. So, mid-range, I would say, run defense this year.
Right.
At only 4,500.
If McCoy doesn't play, then he's interesting.
Right. And all indications, the latest is he probably won't. I mean, the Bills don't have much to play for. It's like, why risk it? So that's looking pretty good. You had mentioned Jerick McKinnon earlier. He's playing, that fun Giants defense, which also likes to give up a lot of points. And he is priced at just $3,500 DraftKings dollars. So.
And they opened their offense up big time once Peterson went out. So if Peterson doesn't play, I think Stephon Diggs is in play as well.
Yeah, look, the Giants' defense for me is similar to the Saints, where I'm going to try to play some players against them because it usually works out. So, all right, now on to receivers, Russ. The previously mentioned Martavis Bryant. A fun fact, at least I thought it was a fun fact, of the top 20 DraftKings receivers, according to DraftKings scoring average each week, Martavis Bryant is the only one priced at under 6,000 still. So, for a cash game or a tournament play, I like Bryant. I mean, he's cheap enough that he's that mid-range receiver for you. He might not be your most high-priced guy, but look, if he was your second or third priced receiver, I'd say that's pretty good.
He gets a lot of targets too now, which is great for him. I really like that play. I mean, especially if you're using Roethlisberger, I think you at least have to have some shares of Bryant. He could go for 30 points literally any week. So it's just finding the right one.
Yeah, and look, even on the cash games, like I said, it seems like he has a floor, for sure. So you had also mentioned Emmanuel Sanders, who, I will readily admit, I was not fond of when the season started. I really thought last year was a fluke. They might try to run it more with Kubiak there, which, I think Demaryius Thomas was the default wide receiver one in that offense. But I don't know, man. Emmanuel Sanders has his days. He had 10 for 181 yesterday and a touchdown. Now, you couldn't be blamed if you didn't play him this week. He had 2 for 17 the week before, 3 for 19 the week before that. So he's even more boomer bust, it seems like, than Bryant, but similarly priced at $5,800.
Yeah, you're not playing Emmanuel Sanders in like a 50-50 or a heads-up game.
Sure.
But like in a tournament, his price is still pretty cheap, and Cincinnati's sort of an intimidating team to look at that he's playing. So, like, I don't think people are going to be high on him this week either. So I think that's an interesting price.
Yeah, and look, if Anquan Bolden can get 19 DraftKings points against the Cincinnati defense, I got to think Emmanuel Sanders is capable. Right. So you also mentioned Brandon Cooks, which I really like that play. Another hit or miss guy, but it seems like the price is right. That he makes a very good value play, just $5,900, and he plays Jacksonville, which again, another one of those defenses that likes to give up a lot of points.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, Breeze, he's at home again. So these are the 2 weeks that you want Breeze. He's averaging like 31 points per game at home this year. So as I mentioned before, but I like Cooks. Who knows? He's usually consistent and has a pretty high floor. But he has random really big games too. So I think he's got a nice floor and ceiling next week.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then to top things off, the aforementioned Anquan Bolden. Man, I can't believe that's the price. $3,700 for this upcoming week against another defense that likes to give up points. I mean,
it's not saying that you like Anquan Bolden or you think he can run over a 5.0 40 right now, but price is insane.
Will his way, Russ. He can will his way.
3,700 is almost min price. So
here's how I look at that. It's 3,700 for the top receiving option on a team. Which, look, he is in San Francisco. That's not to say he's going to get 100 yards, but look, he had 8 for 74 yesterday and a touchdown. That's not bad, and that's with Blaine Gabbert throwing the ball. So for 3,700, look, man. You said David Johnson was in a lot of your lineups or all of them this upcoming week. Anquan Bolden might be in a lot of mine just for that price alone. You can't get many other options at that price.
No. Right. He's a really nice cheap option when you're trying to push in those one more big receiver and you're like, I only have 3,700 left.
Right.
Well, there you go.
Like if you're going for the troika of like Antonio Brown and Julio Jones and Hopkins.
Yeah.
Bolden is a great fourth option amongst that. So, and then tight end, I mean, look, it would not be a fantasy slant with you and I without at least a Gary Barnidge mention. But look, another good play next week, 4,700 DraftKings dollars. Didn't get a lot of yardage this week against Seattle, which traditionally has given up a lot of fantasy points to tight ends. But look, he still got a touchdown.
Be careful with the Chiefs' defense, because on paper it looks like a good matchup, but in Seattle they kind of held their own against that Seattle defense. So I don't know that the Chiefs are as much of a must-play defense as they appear to be.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So, all right, Russ, any parting words of wisdom for our fantasy championship participants? It's a big week, Russ, for a lot of people. What advice from your seat as fantasy expert can you give them?
Don't start Melvin Gordon.
Thank you. That's pretty bad advice. So.
Ever.
Well, again, we'll cover that, Russ, on the Dynasty Slant when that resumes in the off season. Okay, I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about. But
we definitely will.
Right. So, but to all of those still playing this week, good luck. Remember, it's all in the fantasy gods' hands now. So just pray, and we'll all be pulling for you. And just remember, what do we like to say around here, Russ?
It's not your fault.
Not your fault. So win, lose, definitely not your fault. But until next time, he's Russell Clay. I'm Michael Moore, and we will see you next time.